Welcome everyone to Ticketmaster. My name is Daniel Krebs. I've been dabbling in PowerShell since about 2009. First got started with PowerCLI and basically progressed from there and got more advanced. What I want to talk about today is I went to the Powershell and DevOps Global Summit in Bellevue just a few weeks ago, basically similar to the European one, which is coming up. The big advantage of the one in the US is the access to the Microsoft Teams. So you get actually a lot more interaction with the actual developers on the team. So there was Paul Higgins, who's doing debugging, and other people. I'm not sure if you heard about David Wilson, who is working on the PowerShell extension for VS Code. So you get to interact with these people. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to give you a quick recap what happened, and also show you a couple of demos from some stuff I saw, just to give you some ideas what you might want to explore. Cool, let's get started. That was basically the first few slides is just the agenda. So it started on a Sunday. It was a workshop day, and you had different people basically doing a presentation. It wasn't really interactive. So you didn't pull out your laptop and was working. It was more a presentation. As you can see, there's some interesting stuff on there. It's a lot of stuff is focused around DSC, because at the time when they were planning it was DSCs. So you can see there's a lot of DSC content. We are running one DSC lab with Steve Moraski, which some of you might know. I think the advanced function lab was cancelled because Kirk Monroe didn't get to Bellevue on time because there was some Delta issues. So we had a couple of things and a couple of people dropping out. So I think that didn't happen. Then the Monday was a full PowerShell team thing. So it started in the morning with a keynote from Don Jones about the community, and then it went into the team session. So we had an Ask Me Anything with Jeffrey Snover, which I'm going to highlight a couple of things I picked up, and then State of the Shell from the PowerShell team, and then some lightning demos from the team, which is quite interesting. And there's some stuff which is not really public yet. It's coming in the coming beta versions of PowerShell version 6. And in the next, there's sort of a release coming for version 5 as well. So I'm going into the detail. And then at the end, which is very, very valuable, you have a Meet the Team reception. So you can actually speak to the developers and the program managers, which is really good. I went there the first time 2014, and I was actually be able to talk to the guy who was program manager on the deployment stuff. So how to package the WMF framework and PowerShell for the customer. So you could actually talk to them, and I'd say we need 2008 R2 support. If you come up with the next version, we need down-level support so we can actually move on. So you can actually talk to the people, which I think is very valuable. Then on Tuesday was community-based sessions. So we had different stuff, a bit of testing in there, DSC a lot, a bit of Azure. So there was some interesting things I took away. Then, which is also quite nice, we were about 250 attendees, and in the evening on Tuesday you had the option of 2 events. So we had a main reception, and you could also do a game night with people, so you can get to know people who are coming there, other attendees, much better, which is really sort of what drives me as well, going back and meeting the old faces, catching up what happened. So I quite enjoyed that. And then Wednesday it continued with sessions, and there was also the opportunity for the community to do demos as well, which is also in. So you had about 10 minutes where you can show anything you have been working on and get other people to know what you were doing and some tips and tricks. So it was really good. And on the end of the presentation there, which we're going to publish, there are also links to a GitHub repository which has all the details from the speakers from the community lightning demos. So you can go into that repository and see what happened, and you can go further and go to the GitHub repositories and sites. You can follow them on Twitter. So it's all on the last side of. So now we go into the Ask Me Anything with Jeffrey Snower, which is quite interesting. So he likes to talk about how things happened and why things happened. This time he got also questions from the community, and so I'm going to bit into what he answered, but to give you an outlook what's coming, which I think is quite valuable. So one of the questions he had was, what are your biggest regrets you had with PowerShell 1 and 2? Which, and one that he immediately came out with is the formatting and output subsystem. The code they've created to basically create this under the hood for us is very complex to maintain. So he regrets basically the complexity they came up with. It's very difficult. It's good for the end user, so he says, okay, the end user has a good experience, but for the PowerShell team, in the engine, it's really complex. The other one he regrets is actually introducing the return keyword in normal scripts, not in classes. They reintroduced it in classes, which makes sense, because in a class method, if you output something, it doesn't go back into the pipeline. But in a script, it goes into the pipeline. Anything that gets outputted goes into the pipeline. So he regrets it's not intuitive.
He didn't apologize for iterating over null.
No. The other thing is that underused features. There was a question about what are underused features. And the first one he came up with is the adaptive type system. So it's basically the add member commandlet. When you get an object, and then you can add additional properties, script properties and node properties and script methods. And he thinks it's an underused feature, which is fair enough. Transactions is an underused feature, which I think is really true, because who has really used transactions here? Yeah, one. So what you can do with transactions, you can, similar to SQL, you start a transaction, and then, for example, the registry provider, you make all your registry changes. And if anything fails in that block, you can roll back the transaction. All your registry changes you made don't happen unless you end the transaction and it gets committed. So it's an underused feature. I haven't used it myself. I know about it, but I didn't have any use case so far. But I think it's maybe something you want to look into. Maybe you have a use case. And the other one is workflows. Some of you have maybe used it. I think the speed is not really there. It takes a long time to get a workflow going, because what happens, you code it in PowerShell, and then it gets compiled into C#, into an assembly which gets loaded. So I used it quite a bit at the previous company, and you get a lot of CPU usage because of the compilation process, which is not really friendly to a box. But it's a very interesting feature, but there are also some limitations you need to work around. And they don't want to introduce it in PowerShell 6. So PowerShell 6 doesn't have workflows, because it also relies on the UI components or the UI classes of .NET, which are not in PowerShell 6, which is based on .NET Core. The next one, he said, where's the focus for PowerShell? He says, version 5, there's basically maintenance. There will be some minor stuff, which I'm going to show you later, and some bug fixes coming soon. And the investment they are doing is in version 6. So there will be a new version 6 coming soon. Then the question was, what were the language influences on PowerShell? Which I think was quite interesting. I knew a couple of things already, because it's one of the benefits of going to one of these conferences, either US or Europe, and I think Asia as well. At lunchtime or breakfast time, you also is quite keen on telling you stories, what happened, and you can ask him questions. So I already knew from these stories what were some of the influences. So one of the main influences was the VMS DCL language, and there's a link. Did I put it on here? No, it's on the at the end. No, it's actually here. There is a video from the 10th anniversary last year from the Powershell team, and what they are showing there, it starts around minute 6. They are showing Monad, the first version, and you can see how the commandlets. So the commandlets were basically, if you say new hyphen these days, it was new / and then the noun. So and that is something they picked up from the DCL. DCL, a lot of commands is then first the verb, and then the noun separated by /. So they picked this up from this language, influenced by Bash, by Perl, and obviously by C#. The other thing he stressed is since Satya Nadella took the helm of Microsoft, Microsoft became more customer obsessed, and one of the questions was basically how to influence the development of PowerShell and other things, also other products like Windows Server and System Center. And what he said, the customers have actually more power, more leverage to influence where things are going than the internal teams, because they need to have a use case from a customer what to build. So they can't really come up with some stuff which doesn't have a use case. There's no customer out there. So it's something just to keep in mind. If you have problems with PowerShell, I would encourage you, go to user voice, go to your technical account manager, go on Twitter and ask the people, because a lot of them are on Twitter as well, and you can influence things. Like David Wilson is every day on Twitter, and if you have an issue with his PowerShell extension in VS Code, just write him a couple of lines, have a discussion, and then he's going to tell you, okay, I'm going to fix it, please open a GitHub issue with it. So you can actually start to influence some stuff. And since PowerShell came open source and more components are going to be open sourced in the future, you can then influence the direction of these components, which is quite cool, I think. The other interesting phrase he threw out was actually interesting. I just wanted to put it up. He sees himself as an architect, and an architect, architects are the guardians of the full future. So he needs to think about the future, but he needs to make sure it's not going into the wrong direction. It was quite an interesting quote he put out, which I think is, if you guys architect something, you also look into the future and you try to predict what's going on. I think that was an interesting phrase I heard. The other thing they did at the next session was the state of the shell. And this time, the first time, Microsoft nominated or awarded people who have been contributing to PowerShell. And this year they were focusing on contributors for the open source projects. So it was mainly PowerShell, the PowerShell main repository, the C resources, the documentation as well. So you can come under this list if you heavily contribute to documentation as well. And there was something else, which I can't remember. The other thing I want to stress, which I didn't really realize last year when they announced it, is the PowerShell team is now part of the Microsoft Azure organization. And in the coming slides, you will see actually why that makes sense, or where they are going and where this falls in. Which means they are going to focus heavily on Azure features. From what I picked up is there won't be a lot of coming for on-prem. So the changes for the DSC pull server and other things, mostly Azure. Or first Azure and then later at some point we get it on-prem. The other interesting thing they mentioned is Microsoft is going to ship OpenSSH client and server in an upcoming Windows version built in. So you can use OpenSSH to connect to the box, and you will see in a moment why this is actually really cool. Oops. So the next version 5 release, the set is planned for basically the Whetstone release. It's aligned with the next Windows 10 and Windows 2016 releases. I guesstimate it comes around the Ignite conference, which is end of September, that they're going to put out a new release. And this one has a few new things. So they've done a bit in the desired state configuration LCM. There is a massive thing they've done for reporting, the reporting of the state of the machine. So get configuration status, the commandlet, much more richer information. You can really drill down into the information. You get objects back, and you can multiple layers, and you can drill down and see what happened and when and which resources have converged. It was what they showed us during the demo. It was really a lot. They're also going to introduce a monitor-only mode. So you can have a pull server and assign a configuration, but you don't change anything. It just monitors, and then you can use the new reporting stuff to see how your configuration will be doing on that machine. They will be doing something with certificate renewal for SSL, and something with authenticated proxy jobs. That's what they're trying to do. And the other thing is Azure and cloud first. That's why I mentioned that they are now part of the Azure organization. And you will see that a lot more in the few coming slides. The next PowerShell version 6 release is planned. The beta 1 release is for the build conference. They didn't promise it, but they're aiming to do a release around that time. And then they want to put out a beta 2 release in possibly July, August, which has full Linux Mac usability, remoting over SSH in both directions within PowerShell 6. And they want to improve they want to have a dev experience, so you can develop C# and script modules in PowerShell version 6. And they want to put out a PowerShell SDK. The other thing they mention is it's not something they are working on at the moment, but it's something they want to work on. Is they want to redesign the local configuration manager in LCM. As you can see, they want to move towards a single code base, which means they're going to open source it as well. And that's the Azure part as well. They want to build a bootstrap LCM, which is very small, which updates itself. And that's mostly targeted for Azure. They want to integrate DC like native, like they want to bake it into Azure as a native component. So they're focusing on Azure and Nano Server. They want to remove the dependencies on the Windows Management Framework, which will open some opportunities, provide a core local configuration manager as a library we can use in other use cases. Self-update of the LCM. Introduce maintenance windows for your configurations, which I think is valuable. But there was an interesting talk during the community lightning demos. I think the guy came from Microsoft in Australia, and he has developed some resources which do patching, Windows patching, and they allow the usage of maintenance windows. So you can configure it on your resource and say, okay, I want these maintenance windows. Then some future predictions they gave in these sessions, that they want to do something in the DevOps space with PowerShell. They want that's something Bruce Payard will be working on. One of the core developers is parallel task commandlets, not the community ones, but something which is deeper embedded. That's what I said, a native PowerShell experience in Azure. So they want to really embed PowerShell in Azure and DC into Azure, deeply embedded into Azure. they want to do something in continuous intelligence management and smart remediation. And then we go into the lightning demos. So they showed us a demo using remoting over SSH. So you have the choice of using the WSMan protocol, or you can use SSH. You're going to have SSH key authentication, which is really cool, in both directions actually. So you can, from a Linux machine, go to the Windows machine using SSH key authentication, and Linux Windows in both directions. And that's actually already available with Alpha 17. So you can, if you want to play around with it, you can do it and download the latest OpenSSH server from the GitHub repo. That's something changes which you already can do in the PowerShell extension. VS Code has now a native terminal. I'm going to show you this later. There are some PS edit functions. When you're in the native terminal, you have the PS edit function, which is also available in the ISE. And they have improved the debugging, so you can see variables, watches, and other stuff. And something that will be coming is remote script block debugging in VS Code. So if you have a script and you have an invoke command line in there, you set a breakpoint on that line, and then you can with F11 step into this one on a remote machine. So you can debug the script block which is running on a remote machine. You get a new window, new editor basically in VS Code, and then you can step through it and see how your code is doing, which I think is a really cool feature. It was an early thing, it didn't work completely. There are a few issues they're working on, but I think it's a really cool feature. They want to further improve the debugging that's coming in the Redstone release. Invoke web request has been updated. You can now skip certs, so if you connect to an SSL server, you can ignore the cert, which might not be what you expect. And they've improved the speed of invoke web requests to download files. So if you want to download a multi-gigabyte file, it's faster now. They are going to release an API generator for REST APIs, which is quite interesting. And something that's, I think that's available today already. For the Azure DSC Pulse servers, you can now send logs from multiple Pulse servers to the Azure log search functionality. For the Azure Automation Linux, a native VM extension, native hybrid workers, so you have more Linuxy stuff. Something that I think that comes soon is also you can deploy updates to Linux machines. So if you have the hybrid worker and everything running on the Linux machine, you can deploy updates and you can configure maintenance windows. So sort of a replacement of WSUS or WSUS for Linux before, which is interesting. And something else they showed us is they're going to introduce Watcher and Action runbooks in Azure, which are event driven. So based on an event, the Watcher runs, and then it runs an Action runbook. Interesting. The other session I went to is defending PowerShell attacks with Lee Holmes and Paul Higgins, who was one of the developers. And what they wanted to stress is we should use PS remoting instead of RDP. So we should get our admins, sysadmins to use PS remoting instead of RDP. Also for the defending stuff, you should think about enabling script log logging. You can do this via group policy, and it's available since version 5. So you get very rich logging in your event log, which you then can ship off to a central logging solution. And the other thing, you can also encrypt stuff. So let's say you run something with has passwords in there. You can put a public key on the machine where you're logging it, and it encrypts it with the public key, so no one, if someone gets into your box, they can't see your log stuff. And then you ship it to the logging solution, and the logging solution has the private key, and it decrypts the logging, and you can analyze it with some intelligent logging. The other thing they stressed is implement GIA in your environment, which basically means you should think about if you can, instead of people RDPing into the box, give them a PowerShell endpoint, which is locked down, which only has a couple of commands they can use. And you can basically give it to anyone. You can give it to the reception staff, to the ops team, to anyone who needs to use it, to the developers, and they can do certain things. They can, for example, in production, they can look at services, at the status of a service. If you grant them access, they can restart the service, and this kind of stuff. So they stress the point that you should think about implementing just enough administration. And the other thing which is new in Windows 10 and 2016 is device guard. So there's a lot more things you can do around the device, locking down the device. So now I'm going to do a demo that was part of the community lightning demos. One of the guys has developed a Slack bot written in PowerShell, which I only realized at the conference, which was at the end. There was a small DevOps Nano conference on Thursday. So he did the demo again, and then I only started to realize what is the power of this bot. So I want to show you a few things with the bot. It's very easy to install. It's in the PowerShell gallery. There are very few plugins at this point, which are PowerShell modules. But you can probably at some point, maybe if you think about it, appreciate what it can do for the company. And I will give you some ideas which I had after the demo. So
were there any changes to the PowerShell ISE?
no. My personal opinion is they are currently only focusing on the PowerShell extension for VS Code. Because the guy who is in charge of the ISE these days is also the developer of the PowerShell extension for VS Code. So he doesn't have time to work on a new version of ISE. And from the evolution of the VS Code extension, you can see they're putting a lot of work in there. I don't think there will be much happening in the next few years with the ISE. I think the focus will be VS Code. It's my personal opinion and from what I've seen so far. Cool. Can you see that? Or is that too small? Yeah. So basically, the bot, I quickly go to the GitHub page here. There is basically getting started with the bot is really easy. You just go basically to the GitHub page, and then you go to the quick start, and it basically tells you everything you need to do, how to install it from the PowerShell gallery, what you need to put in here, and how to start the bot. So that's basically super easy. The only thing you need to do is to hook it up to your Slack team. Is you need to get an API token, and it took me a moment to actually find where that is. So what you need to do is you basically in Slack you go to apps and integrations, and then you're basically on the page if you're logged in Chrome or in your browser, and then you go to manage in the right hand corner, and then to custom integrations, and there you can see the bots you've configured, and you can add new bots as well. That takes a moment. So you basically get a list of bots, and you can add a new configuration, and it generates a key, and you can use the key to authenticate with the Slack API. So it's really easy to get started, so I'll show you this quickly. So I've already downloaded the module. Oops, what's happened here? do this again. No. The PowerShell tab. Okay, come on. Oops. Okay. So, I've already downloaded the module. So I'm not going to do the first step. So the next thing is importing the module, which is easy, and then you need to give the bot some information. You need to name the bot. So I named it Hitchhiker. Define the admins of the bot. So basically your Slack handles who can work with the bot, because the bot also has permissions. So you can use Active Directory groups and roles and stuff. I didn't go too much into detail when I was looking at it, but you have a very deep permissioning model. So you can, for example, have your developers get access to certain plugins and functions in there while you are in an incident. For example, you have an incident, you create a new channel for an incident, you invite the bot, and already pre-configured you have the developers, they have certain access. They can, let's say, they can ask the bot about the status of the environment in AWS or on-premise or in your monitoring environment. So there's already permissions in there which you can configure. Then you configure the backend environment, which is I put the Slack token in an environment variable because I didn't want to have it on the recording. And if you have a plugin like Wolfram Alpha, you also need an API key, and you put it into this configuration. And then you create the configuration, you create an object, and then you can also save the configuration, and you can reload it again. And then you just start the bot. I hope it's... Yeah. Then we start the bot. So unfortunately you don't see anything really on the screen. There's no output. Even with me specifying verbose, there was no really output. So now you can, if you go back into Slack, you can see the Slack bot is available now, and you can talk to them. Or you can go into your channel and you can invite the bot into your channel. It's basically similar as if you do an incident. And then the first command, similar to what you would do in PowerShell, get help. So you ask the bot what kind of commands it has. So there are some built-in commands. As you can see, you can install a plugin, which is basically installing a PowerShell module from the PowerShell gallery. You see the permissioning system here, where you can add roles and users and stuff. You can remove stuff. So you see there's already a lot built in. You can query the PowerShell gallery for modules which have been tagged with poshbot. So if I do find module, find plugin, sorry. It's plugin. I would have loved if we would have kept module instead of plugin, to be honest. So and then you get basically from the gallery, you see the modules which are currently tagged with poshbot. And then you can install the plugin. So let's say we want to install the poshbot Wolfram plugin. So it quickly installs. It basically puts it in your PS module path. And then you can do another help thing here, and you see at the end of the list you see the the function which is now available, ask Wolfram. So once you get to the stage where you write your own modules, could be getting AD user, getting other stuff, you can use that. So if I do an ask Wolfram, as I who see what comes up. Yeah. So you can use APIs as well. So an example I'm going to show you in a moment on the slides is actually what I thought about. What we can, just some ideas for the business. You can use it for Active Directory, for example. So let's say you have a service desk or an ops team who very often need to unlock and disable and enable or reset passwords from accounts. You could basically use the bot for that in a discussion. So you have your channel of your team, and then you get a ticket and you type it into the channel and it unlocks the user and it's documented. Which is quite I think an interesting use case, which is something I want to actually pursue at Ticketmaster for the ops team. I think I've heard unlocking accounts quite often. You can do it for general administration, give access to restart services, invoke cleanup jobs, or get system information. I think it's a good use case. For monitoring data, so what the developer of Poshbot showed, he created a plugin where you can get a graph. So it goes off to, I think it was Negios, and then it pulled down the information, created a graph on the fly and put it as a picture in your Slack, which I think would be powerful for an incident situation. If people want to know the CPU usage over the last few hours or minutes, just ask the bot to get the information for monitoring, get a graph, and then you can talk about it. I think that's quite an interesting concept. You could use it for Octopus deployment. So if in a developer channel, initiate a release deployment instead of going into the web UI, get the status of something, grant or revoke user access. I think that's some use cases we probably can use as well because we use Octopus. Sorry for the power outage. I didn't expect that would happen. But I think you're filled up now with pizza and beer, so that's cool. Yeah. So I'm going to skip a demo which I've planned, and I'm going to finish the Poshbot stuff and then switch to another presentation which one of the Microsoft primary field engineers did. I just want to make you aware of the content so you can investigate yourself. It's a very interesting thing he showed us. So for Poshbot, for leisure, you can get the weather, you can get public transport information. A lot of them already have APIs. So basically you can use the bot also for your own benefit. If you want a flight, if someone of your loved ones coming in, you want a flight, you want to maybe get notified, just tell the bot, please watch the flight status. And you can ask Wolfram Alpha, Wikipedia and other services, which might be useful. You can get the price of a gadget you're looking for. Check the eBay authentication status, and maybe also notify your partner you will be late. You're working on something and just go into Slack and say, okay, I'm late, and then it was actually the weather and the late, and this public transport was actually inspired by a talk that one of the Rackspace guys did last year at the Powershell Meetup. He did a REST API talk around what you can do. You can get the weather, you can get the bus status, you can get, and then you send an email to your partner. So that was inspired by this one. And I think you can take it to the next level with a bot. You can just tell the bot to do it because he was executing a command in a PowerShell session. So might be something. I'm going to skip the debugging because that will take probably 15-20 minutes. And I'm going to basically go quickly through his presentation he did at the summit. So he basically gave us some ideas how to get around the Krebs double up scenario. And so I'm going to switch to his presentation. and he kindly agreed that I can show it here. So Ashley is one of the primary field engineers in the Active Directory space. He's also very active on Twitter, so you can ask him, and he's also tweeting stuff. So it's definitely someone worth following, I think. And what he was basically showing us was you probably have come across this as well. So you're logged into server A and you remote to server B, but you can't remote from that session to server C because your credentials are not forwarded to server C. For one use case, for example, is you are on server B, you want to install an application from a file share, but even with your admin credentials, you can't access the file share from the server B because your credentials are not getting delegated to server C, which could be a file share or some other service which uses Windows authentication. So see, it's the first hop succeeds, the next hop fails because you have this double hop scenario that the second hop fails because your credentials are not getting delegated. And there's one solution you could use is enabling Quad SSP on the client and on the server. And then you can travel further to the next machine, but the downside of this one is it actually puts your password into memory on the box. So if this is a server which gets hacked, they can actually extract the password from memory, especially in the earlier operating system. They have done a lot of work 2016, so they made it more difficult to extract credentials, cached credentials from memory. But as I guess most of us are dealing with 2008, 2012 machines, 12 is a bit better. There are a few more protections in 12, but a lot of stuff is also still 2008. So you don't have the protection in the kernel to protect you from these hacks. So Quad SSP is really not a good idea. It's basically like you logging into, RDPing into that box and your credentials get cached there, which is not ideal. So if they get cached and someone gets credentials, he can actually go to a server which you didn't want, that the person wanted. You didn't want to give access to because they can extract the password. There's one thing you can do in Active Directory. You can configure unconstrained delegation, which basically means this server can access all the other ones. We'll see this in a moment. So you can also still access other servers you might not want for this session to be accessed. And then you can configure constraint delegation, which is a bit more tricky in Active Directory. You actually need to configure the service which you allow to access. It's a bit of a tricky thing. It's tricky to configure. And then the problem with that is it's service-based. And the C machine can't really say, okay, I don't want this server to access. And constraint delegation doesn't work with WinRM. So it works if C is a file server, but it doesn't work if you want to use, basically you want to remote into a box and then you want to remote into the next box. Something I think they introduced in 2012, R2 I think, is you can now configure resource-based Krebs constraint delegation. It's not visible in the Active Directory users and computers console. It's all PowerShell based. So you need to use PowerShell commandlets with the right parameters to configure resource-based constraint delegation. And in this case, server C actually says, okay, I'm allowing connection from this. If you have another server which is not permissioned, you can't access server C. So it's actually what you want. You want to say, okay, server C expects incoming connections from this one and no one else. So the other servers won't work. It's actually available. You can use it from the client, and 2012. Yeah, and for 2008 and R2, you will need to install a hotfix. You can basically have a Windows server participating in that, but the server will need this hotfix. The only thing you need in the domain, you need at least 2012 as a domain controller, so it can do this stuff. I think that he mentioned it's only you only need the schema, really. And it's relatively easy to set up. I'll show you a few slides in a few minutes. It works across domains and only requires admin control over one server. With the non-resources-based constraint delegation, you always sort of need a domain admin which goes onto the object and configures the constraint delegation either in the UI or through PowerShell commandlets, which is not really, it's really painful. Especially if you want to enable your, for example, your sequence team to use constraint delegation for something. This was always the problem at the previous company. They had an application server which was accessing the SQL server, and the stored procedure was accessing a file share. So you needed to configure constraint delegation, and they always came to us to configure the SQL server's account to allow constraint delegation to this other resource. So it was the interaction was quite painful. You have the basically commandlets, which basically where you can configure that. It's available in 2012, and the parameters basically principals allow to delegate account, and they're on these commandlets. It's pretty easy. You configure it, you purge your Krebs list at the end, and then you can use it. Or you can do it to many. I'll show you at the end. You can check it. There's the attribute in Active Directory is this one, if you care to know. And then you can basically give access to a particular server. It's very easy to do. This doesn't work with this still doesn't work with WinRM, with PowerShell remoting, because the WinRM runs as network service, and network service isn't allowed to do this. And as you can see, Microsoft doesn't support running WinRM under domain user or generic service account, managed service account. So it doesn't work for PowerShell. It works if you do this for file share. So if you remote into server B and then you want to install something from a repository or from a file share, it works. You can configure that, and you showed it to us as well. But we can't do it for remoting. So I'm going to show you in a moment. So you can do software installs to the server. So we did a demo. And then something interesting he showed us, which is applicable to PowerShell remoting. You can actually remote into another box. So you get your credentials on your workstation or Jumpbox servers. Then you invoke a command on server B, supplying your credentials. And then you use another invoke command to go to server C and use the same credentials here. So you basically, because of the using statement here, you're injecting the credentials into the script block. And what he said is that it's actually secure because the credentials are not cached on server B. So, and they had discussions internally at Microsoft with the actual teams who know about security much more, and they said it's secure. So the credentials don't get cached on server B and they don't get cached on server C, but you can still pass through the credentials to server C to do something for you. And you can also, I think there's a slide. No, there's not a slide. You could also get credential A for the first hop, and then get credential B for the second hop and inject it. So if you have a multi-domain scenario, you need to go into one box to get to the next one, but there's no trust. You can go into the first box and then use different credentials to go into the second box and execute anything which is PowerShell.
Don't know if I can ask a question, but
Sure.
copy item, for example, takes a credential parameter,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't actually work with a credential.
Oh, cool.
So how would you access a file share and copy a file off a server C in this case?
I would probably make sure that this server C has access to the file server with these credentials. Because once you're in server C with the credentials for, let's say, that domain, then you can access the file share. And I don't think you actually need the credential parameter on copy item. You can just use copy item straight. If this server is permissioned,
But you're
probably
running
not
command
actually.
on server C, and then try to copy it back to server B, which again.
No, that probably wouldn't work. You probably would want to run the command on server B to access server C. Yeah. I don't know if I don't have an answer for that, to be honest. I mean, you could, if it doesn't work. I haven't used it myself, to be honest. You can give it a try. Otherwise, it's probably worth opening user voice with the PowerShell team if it's not already there.
Right.
Make them aware, or go on Twitter and tweet it to the PowerShell team and Jeffrey Snova and the guys.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I found to get around it is to create a new PS drive basically and then delete it afterwards.
Yeah.
With V5 you can use, there's a to and from session on copy item.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
So if you can spin up a new session, you can do copy to session and copy from session. So you could use invoke command in that scenario, but you would need to set up session for the same thing.
Right. Okay.
I think it's just.
And you only need that on the client side, not
Mhm.
the server side. So you wouldn't need PowerShell 5 on server C, you'd need it on the main client itself to get it all the way out.
Yeah, just test it. Maybe also, which PowerShell version did you use? 5.0 or 5.1?
V5.1.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I haven't heard of that, so that's worth testing.
Yeah, it's just cool. So, what he said, don't use quad SSP because it stamps your credentials onto the box, which you don't want. So you can use nested invoke command, or you can use resource trace constraint delegation for stuff which isn't PowerShell remoting. So now I'll quickly go back to the other slides and show you. So I'm going to skip this demo because of time. And thank you very much for listening. And you can ask me questions and comments afterwards. I just want to show you at the end. I put some links in there to different things. So to the summit, you can look when the next summit is. It's in April next year in the US. If you fancy going to the US. The summit material from the community lighting demo sessions in this GitHub link. You can watch a video on Monad version 1. You can read Monad manifesto and other stuff there. That's basically the main Microsoft site for PowerShell. So it's sort of, as end user, you go there and you get the download links for WMF5 and other stuff. So if you want to go there, I would definitely, if you use any RSS readers, subscribe to these blogs from the PowerShell team, PowerShell Gallery, and then the other links for the stuff, the Poshboards. Some stuff I didn't get to, unfortunately. And then the other stuff, join our Slack team, join our meetups, and follow us on Twitter, please.